Admiral Rogers stood at the massive window of the Galactic Council's main chamber, his four hands clasped tightly behind his back. The purple skin on his neck had turned almost white with stress, a clear sign of his growing worry. Before him, the endless dark of space stretched out, dotted with the lights of 10,000 ships from 40 different species. But it wasn't enough. They all knew it wasn't enough. "Play the message again," he ordered, his voice rough from too many sleepless cycles. The hologram flickered to life in the center of the chamber. The same terrifying images that had haunted him for the past week appeared once more. Massive ships, ancient and terrible, awakening from their million-year sleep at the edge of known space. The slumbering fleet. Every child in the galaxy knew the stories, but no one had believed they were real. "Sir," his aide, Officer Reed, approached with a datapad. "We've received responses from all major civilizations. The Bright Empire is sending their entire third fleet. The Stone Mines are deploying their full military force. Even the Deep Dwellers are rising from their ocean worlds to join us." Rogers nodded slowly. "And the humans?" Reed hesitated. "That's why I'm here, sir. They responded just now. And they're sending one ship." Rogers turned so quickly that his ceremonial cape tangled around his legs. "What did you say?" "One ship, sir. They call it the Prometheus." The Admiral stared at his aide, all four eyes blinking in confusion. "There must be a mistake. Show me." Reed handed over the datapad. The message was clear and simple. "Earth acknowledges the threat. We will send the Prometheus to join the defense fleet. Coordinates and timing received. No additional ships will be necessary." Rogers read it 3 times before looking up. "Get me Earth's ambassador. Now." 10 minutes later, Ambassador White's hologram stood before him. The human looked oddly calm, almost amused. "Ambassador, there must be some mistake. The slumbering fleet has over 100,000 ships. Every civilization is sending their entire military force. We need Earth's full fleet." White smiled slightly. "Admiral, we understand the threat completely. The Prometheus will be sufficient." "Sufficient?" Rogers' voice rose. "Ambassador, with all due respect to your species, this is not the time for human pride. We've seen the scans. These ships have technology we can barely understand. They're awakening from an era when our species were all still learning to make fire. We're well aware of their technological advantage, Admiral." "Then why?" "The Prometheus will arrive at the designated coordinates in 3 days. Captain Walker and his crew are looking forward to working with the joint fleet." White's smile remained unchanged. "Trust me, Admiral. One ship is all we need to send." Before Rogers could argue further, the hologram vanished. The Admiral stood in silence for a long moment. Finally, he turned to Reed. "Get me everything we have on this Prometheus. Every scan, every report, every rumor. And find out who this Captain Walker is." "Sir," Reed said hesitantly, "I did some preliminary research. The Prometheus is unusually large for a warship, almost 4 times the size of our biggest vessels. But our scans can't penetrate its hull, and its energy readings make no sense." "What do you mean?" "Sometimes it reads like it's powered by a small sun. Other times, it barely registers as powered at all. And its crew complement." "Yes. Only 50 people, sir, for a ship that size." Rogers turned back to the window, watching the gathered fleet of 10,000 ships. 10,000 ships that might not be enough to save their worlds from an ancient evil. And the humans, the unpredictable humans who had joined their galactic community just 30 years ago, thought they could help with just one ship. "Sir," Reed prompted, "what should we tell the other fleet commanders?" Rogers kept staring at the stars. Tell them to wait. The humans have surprised us before. Let's see what they're planning this time." He just hoped they weren't all going to regret this human surprise. The Prometheus appeared at the edge of the gathering point exactly on schedule. Its arrival made every sensor operator in the combined fleet sit up straight in alarm. "That can't be right," muttered Chief Scanner Smith of the Council's flagship. He adjusted his instruments and tried again. "Admiral Rogers, sir, you need to see this." Rogers moved quickly to the scanning station. The image on the screen showed a ship that dwarfed everything else in the fleet. The Prometheus was massive, a dark gray giant that seemed to swallow the light of nearby stars. Its hull had an odd shifting quality that made it hard to focus on any one part. "Are they compensating for something?" joked one of the junior officers, but nobody laughed. The ship's design broke every rule of space combat. Instead of the sleek, practical shapes preferred by most species, the Prometheus looked like a floating mountain range. Its surface was covered in what appeared to be bumps and ridges that made no logical sense. "Open a channel to Captain Walker," Rogers ordered. The human captain's face appeared on the main screen. He was younger than Rogers expected, with calm eyes and a slight smile that reminded the Admiral uncomfortably of Ambassador White. "Admiral Rogers," Walker nodded. "The Prometheus is ready to join your fleet." "Captain, our scans are having trouble reading your ship. We can't even determine your weapon systems." Walker's smile widened slightly. "Don't worry about our weapons, Admiral. We have what we need." Before Rogers could respond, Officer Reed burst onto the bridge. "Sir, the Deep Dwellers science ship reports something strange. The Prometheus, it's changing." "Changing? How?" "They say parts of the hull are moving, rearranging themselves." Walker looked amused. "Just routine maintenance. Nothing to worry about." Rogers studied the human carefully. "Captain, I have 40 species out there waiting to face an enemy that could destroy our civilization. They're all risking everything. The least you could do is tell us what your ship is capable of." "Admiral." Walker leaned forward, his expression growing serious. "If I told you, you wouldn't believe me. It's better if we show you when the time comes. But I promise you this, the Prometheus is exactly what humanity needed to send. No more, no less." A new alert sounded. Reed checked his tablet and went pale. "Sir, energy readings from the Prometheus just spiked. They're off the charts." On the main view screen, the massive ship's surface rippled like water. Entire sections shifted and flowed like liquid metal. The bumps and ridges rearranged themselves into new patterns. "Captain Walker," Rogers demanded, "what is happening to your ship?" "Getting ready," Walker replied calmly. "Our scouts detected the first wave of the slumbering fleet. They'll be here in less than 6 hours." "Ready? You're one ship against 100,000. What could you possibly—" "Admiral," Walker interrupted gently, "did you ever wonder why we humans survived so many diseases in our history? Why viruses couldn't wipe us out? What does that have to do with anything? Because we learned from them. We learned how a tiny thing could overcome a much larger enemy. We learned about adaptation, about evolution, about changing faster than your opponent can respond." Walker's eyes gleamed. "The Prometheus isn't just a ship, Admiral. It's an idea. And ideas can multiply." Rogers stared at the screen, a strange feeling growing in his gut. Around the Prometheus, space itself seemed to shimmer, as if reality was having trouble keeping up with whatever the ship was becoming. "Sir," Reed whispered, "the enemy fleet. They've accelerated. They'll be here in 4 hours." Rogers looked at Walker's confident face, then at the enormous, shifting form of the Prometheus. Whatever the humans had planned, they were about to find out if one ship could really make a difference. He just hoped they wouldn't all be dead when they got their answer. 3 hours until the enemy arrived. The combined fleet moved into defensive positions, spreading out across a vast area of space, all except the Prometheus, which continued its strange transformations. "They're going to get us all killed," growled Commander Stone of the Bright Empire. His hologram flickered angrily in the council chamber. "One ship performing circus tricks while we prepare for battle." Rogers watched the tactical display as more sections of the Prometheus shifted and changed. The ship now looked nothing like its original form. Strange structures grew and disappeared across its surface, like metal flowers blooming and dying in seconds. "Look," Officer Reed pointed at a new reading. Energy surged from the human ship. A pulse of light erupted from the Prometheus. When it faded, something had fallen off the ship. No, not fallen. Separated. A smaller vessel, about the size of a standard cruiser, now floated beside the massive human ship. Then another piece separated, and another. "Captain Walker," Rogers called through the comm. "Your ship is falling apart." Walker's voice came back, still irritatingly calm. "Not falling apart, Admiral. Growing. Dividing. Like cells in a living thing." More pieces continued to break away from the Prometheus. Each one immediately began to change shape, transforming into what looked like complete ships. But they were unlike any ships Rogers had ever seen. Each one was different, unique, as if they were being designed and built in real time. 2 hours until enemy contact," announced Reed. Commander Stone's hologram jabbed a finger at Rogers. "Order them to stop whatever game they're playing. We need every ship in defensive formation." "Begging your pardon, Commander," Walker's voice cut in. "But you really don't want us to stop. The Prometheus isn't done yet. Not even close." Rogers stared in amazement as the number of ships splitting from the Prometheus increased exponentially. Dozens became hundreds. Hundreds became thousands. Each new vessel was smaller than the last, but they moved with incredible speed and precision. 1 hour to enemy contact, Reed updated. The space around the Prometheus now swarmed with ships of all sizes. The original vessel had shrunk to half its size, but it showed no signs of stopping its endless division. "Captain Walker," Rogers asked, "how many ships are you creating?" "As many as we need, Admiral. Each one is controlled by our central AI. Each one can think and adapt independently, but they all work together. Like white blood cells fighting an infection." Stone's hologram sputtered. "This is insanity. No crew could control so many ships." "We don't need crew," Walker explained patiently. "These ships are made of programmable matter, what you might call nanites. They're alive in their own way, and they're very, very good at learning." 30 minutes to contact," Reed announced. His voice shook slightly. First enemy scouts detected at extreme range. Rogers watched as the cloud of human ships, now numbering in the tens of thousands, began to arrange themselves into complex patterns. They moved like a flock of birds, flowing and shifting in perfect coordination. "All ships, battle positions," Rogers ordered. He turned to Walker's image on the screen. "I hope you know what you're doing, Captain. Trust me, Admiral. We've been planning this for a long time. The enemy thinks they're superior because their technology is ancient and powerful. But age can be a weakness. Old things." Walker smiled that infuriating smile again. "Old things often have trouble dealing with new ideas." The first enemy scout ships appeared at the edge of visual range. Dark shapes against the stars, they moved with the confidence of predators who hadn't faced a real fight in a million years. Rogers gripped his command rail tightly. The next few minutes would show whether humanity's single ship had been an act of madness or brilliance. He had a growing suspicion he knew which one it was. The enemy scout ships moved like black knives cutting through space. Their hulls absorbed light, making them look like holes in reality. Each one was the size of a small moon. "Energy readings from the scout ships are beyond anything in our database," Officer Reed reported, his fingers dancing across his console. "Their weapons are, sir, just one of their scout ships could destroy our entire fleet." Rogers watched as the first wave of the slumbering fleet emerged from hyperspace. Massive ships, each one different, each one terrible in its ancient power. They moved in perfect formation, a display of strength meant to terrify their opponents. It was working. 10,000 enemy ships detected. Reed's voice cracked. 20,000. 30,000. The tactical display filled with red dots as more of the enemy fleet arrived. They kept coming, wave after wave, until the stars themselves seemed to vanish behind their numbers. "All ships, hold position," Rogers ordered, though his own hearts were pounding. "Captain Walker, if you have a plan, now would be a good time." Walker's voice came through calm and clear. "Watch the Prometheus, Admiral. The show is about to begin." The human ship had continued its division throughout the enemy's arrival. The space around it now writhed with countless smaller vessels, all moving in perfect synchronization. The original Prometheus had shrunk to barely the size of a destroyer, but it pulsed with energy like a living heart. "Enemy fleet is launching fighters," Reed announced. "Millions of them. They're heading straight for us." The black tide of enemy fighters surged forward. Each one was equipped with weapons that could tear through the strongest shields. The combined fleet's own fighters moved to intercept, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. That's when the Prometheus made its move. Its swarm of ships suddenly broke apart. The larger vessels split into smaller ones. The smaller ones divided again and again, until space itself seemed to shimmer with uncountable tiny points of light. "What are we seeing?" Commander Stone demanded through the comm. "What are those things?" "Nanite ships," Walker explained. "Each one no bigger than a fighter, but each one able to think, adapt, and evolve. And most importantly," he paused as the first wave of enemy fighters reached the human swarm, "each one able to learn." The battle that followed defied description. The enemy fighters, for all their power, couldn't land a single hit on the human ships. The nanite vessels flowed around them like water, analyzing their weapons, their shields, their tactics. With each passing second, the tiny ships changed, adapted, improved. "Impossible," Stone whispered. They're evolving in real time." The nanite ships began to fight back. They discovered weaknesses in the enemy shields, found gaps in their defenses that had been programmed 1,000,000 years ago and never updated. What started as a battle became something else entirely. "Sir," Reed's eyes were wide. "The nanite ships, they're not just destroying the enemy fighters. They're absorbing them, using their materials to make more of themselves." Rogers watched in awe as the human ships turned the enemy's strength against them. Each destroyed fighter became raw material for more nanite vessels. The swarm grew larger, stronger, smarter. The main enemy fleet began to move forward, their massive weapons charging. But Walker didn't seem concerned. "You see, Admiral," he said softly, "the biggest drawback of being an ancient, superior species is that you stop evolving. You think you've reached perfection. But life never stops changing." The Prometheus, now barely larger than a shuttle, pulsed one final time. Its last reserves of programmable matter burst forth, joining the swarm. The battle was about to enter its final phase, and the ancient enemy was about to learn a harsh lesson about underestimating younger species. The main slumbering fleet moved forward like a wall of darkness. Their massive weapons began to glow with energy that could shatter planets. The combined Council fleet watched in tense silence, waiting to see what the human nanite ships would do next. "Enemy capital ships firing," Reed shouted. Beams of impossible power lashed out from the ancient vessels, but the nanite swarm moved like a living thing, creating gaps in its formation that allowed the energy weapons to pass harmlessly through. Not a single shot found its target. "Fascinating," Walker commented, as if he were watching an interesting science experiment. "Their targeting systems are actually quite primitive. They never needed to improve them because raw power was always enough." Rogers gripped his command rail. "That's wonderful, Captain, but can your ships actually hurt them? Those vessels have shields that could survive a supernova." "Watch," Walker said simply. The nanite swarm split into thousands of smaller groups. Each group flowed toward a different enemy ship, surrounding them like schools of fish. The ancient vessels fired again and again, but hitting the tiny, fast-moving targets proved impossible. "Sir," Reed's voice was filled with surprise. "The nanite ships, They're changing shape again. The tiny vessels began to flatten themselves, spreading out into impossibly thin sheets of programmable matter. They pressed against the enemy shields, not trying to break through them, but instead, they're studying the shield frequencies, Walker explained. Learning, adapting. Evolution isn't just about fighting harder. Sometimes it's about finding a better way. Suddenly, holes began appearing in the enemy shields. The nanite ships poured through these gaps like water through a strainer. They attached themselves to the hulls of the ancient vessels, spreading across their surfaces. What are they doing? Commander Stone demanded. The same thing Earth's smallest organisms do to survive, Walker said. They're changing their enemy from the outside in. The surfaces of the enemy ships began to change color, turning from black to gray as the nanites consumed their outer layers. The ancient vessels fired their weapons wildly now, but they couldn't hit the threat that was literally attached to their hulls. Incoming transmission from the enemy fleet, Reed announced. A harsh, grating voice filled the command center. What is this? What weapon is this? Not a weapon, Walker replied calmly. Think of it more as a very aggressive form of evolution. Your ships are being repurposed. The enemy commander's voice turned to rage. Impossible. We are the slumbering fleet. We have destroyed 1,000 civilizations. Yes, Walker agreed. And you never had to improve, never had to adapt. That's why you can't stop this. Our ships aren't just fighting you. They're learning from every contact, every reaction, every defense you try. They're evolving faster than you can respond. On the tactical display, more and more enemy ships were turning gray as the nanites consumed them. Some of the ancient vessels tried to self-destruct, but the nanites had already infected their control systems. Others attempted to flee, only to find their engines had been transformed into useless metal. Sir, Reed reported with awe in his voice, the nanites aren't just destroying the enemy ships. They're converting them into more nanite vessels. The swarm is growing exponentially. Rogers watched as the mighty slumbering fleet, terror of the galaxy, was literally transformed ship by ship into more of the humans' adaptive vessels. The few enemy ships that remained unchanged began to retreat in panic. You see, Admiral, Walker said quietly, sometimes the most powerful force in the universe isn't strength or advanced technology. Sometimes it's the ability to change, to adapt, to become something new. Humanity learned that lesson early in our history. Today, we're teaching it to someone else. The battle wasn't over yet, but its outcome was no longer in doubt. The age of the slumbering fleet was ending, consumed by a single human ship that had become an endless swarm of evolution itself. The remaining ships of the slumbering fleet tried desperately to escape, but it was already too late. The nanite swarm had learned too much, adapted too well. What had started as one human ship had become a vast cloud of intelligent machines that filled space like a silver storm. Enemy fleet down to 20% strength, Reed reported, still sounding amazed. The nanites have converted most of their ships into more of themselves. Rogers watched as another ancient vessel was consumed by the gray tide. Captain Walker, I have to ask, how did humanity develop this technology? Walker's image smiled on the command screen. We learned it from the smallest life forms on Earth. Viruses, bacteria, single-cell organisms. They've been practicing adaptive warfare for billions of years. We just copied their methods on a larger scale. A desperate message came through from the enemy commander. Stop this. You cannot do this to us. We are the ancient ones. We are the superior beings. Superior. Walker shook his head. You're just old. You stopped growing, stopped changing, stopped learning. That's not superiority. That's stagnation. The tactical display showed the remaining enemy ships trying to form a defensive circle. Their weapons, once terrifyingly powerful, now seemed useless against the ever-evolving nanite swarm. Each blast they fired was analyzed, understood, and countered within seconds. Sir, Reed's eyes widened at his console. The nanites, They're not just learning from the enemy's weapons. They're improving them. The converted ships are showing energy readings far beyond the originals. Walker nodded. That's right. Evolution doesn't just help you survive. It helps you become better. Every ship we convert adds to our knowledge, makes us stronger, smarter, more efficient. The enemy commander's voice came through again, but this time it held something new. Fear. What are you? How can one species do this? We're human, Walker replied simply. This is what we do. We adapt. We change. We evolve. And we teach others to do the same, whether they want to learn or not. The last remnants of the slumbering fleet broke formation, each ship trying to flee in a different direction. But the nanite swarm had spread too far, become too vast. There was nowhere left to run. Look at their tactics, Walker commented to Rogers. 1,000,000 years of power, and they still don't understand the concept of adaptation. They're trying the same escape maneuvers they used in their last war, probably fought before our species even existed. Rogers watched as the final enemy ships were surrounded and consumed by the nanite swarm. And what happens now, Captain? What do we do with this evolutionary weapon you've created? Now, Walker smiled. Now we help it grow even further. The converted ships are already improving themselves, finding better ways to function. By tomorrow, they'll be unrecognizable. By next week, they'll have developed abilities we haven't even imagined yet. The tactical display showed the last enemy vessel being transformed, its ancient hull giving way to the new evolving technology. The battle was over. The slumbering fleet, terror of the galaxy, had been defeated by a single human ship that had become something entirely new. One question, Captain, Rogers said quietly. Why didn't you tell us about this capability from the start? Why let us think you were crazy, sending just one ship? Walker's smile turned thoughtful. Admiral, if I told you we had a ship that could evolve like a virus and convert enemy vessels into copies of itself, would you have believed me? Sometimes it's better to show than tell. Besides, he added with a slight grin, we humans have learned that being underestimated can be a powerful advantage. Around them, the nanite swarm continued to evolve, a testament to humanity's most powerful weapon, the ability to change. 1 week after the battle, Admiral Rogers stood in the Galactic Council's main chamber. The massive window that once showed the gathered fleet now displayed something far more remarkable. A cloud of constantly evolving ships, each one different from the last, each one more advanced than anything the galaxy had ever seen. The final report is ready, sir, Officer Reed said, handing over a datapad. Not a single casualty from our combined fleet. The entire slumbering fleet, converted. Over 100,000 ancient ships transformed into evolving nanite vessels. Rogers nodded slowly. And how are our human friends doing? Captain Walker reports that the transformed ships have already developed 57 new technologies we've never seen before. The nanites are learning from each other, growing, creating new possibilities. The chamber's door slid open, and Commander Stone walked in. The once skeptical alien leader now moved with a hint of humility. The Bright Empire has officially withdrawn its complaint about Earth's single-ship deployment, he announced. In fact, they're requesting human assistance in developing their own adaptive technology. I'm afraid they'll be disappointed, a familiar voice said. They turned to see Walker entering the chamber, still wearing that slight smile. The nanite technology isn't something we can just hand over. It needs to be developed naturally, evolved over time. That's the whole point. Rogers gestured at the window. And what about all of this? What happens to these ships now? They'll continue to grow and change, Walker explained. We've programmed them with core directives. Protect life, preserve knowledge, defend the galaxy. Beyond that, they'll develop on their own, just like every living thing should. But you can control them, right? Stone asked nervously. Walker's smile widened. Control? No. Guide, maybe. Suggest, certainly. But trying to control evolution is missing the point. Life finds its own way. That's what makes it beautiful. A flash of light from outside drew their attention. One of the larger converted ships had just transformed into something entirely new, a shape that seemed to bend space itself around it. Remarkable, Rogers whispered. All this from one ship. That's what we tried to tell you, Walker said. Sometimes quantity isn't the answer. Sometimes you need to think differently. The slumbering fleet was powerful because they were ancient, but they were vulnerable because they stopped adapting. Humanity survived on Earth because we never stopped changing, never stopped looking for new ways to overcome challenges. Reed looked up from his console. Sir, we're getting reports from across the galaxy. The news of the battle has spread. Over 30 species have requested membership in the Galactic Council, including some we thought were our enemies. Of course they have. Walker nodded. They've just seen what happens when you refuse to evolve. They've learned the lesson we learned long ago. Adapt or fade away. Rogers turned to face the human captain. One last question, Walker. The Prometheus, was it really just one ship, or did you have a backup plan? Walker laughed. Admiral, the backup plan was the same as the main plan. Adapt to whatever happened. If the nanites hadn't worked, we would have tried something else. And if that failed, we would have tried again. That's the real secret of humanity's success. We never stopped trying new things. Outside, the swarm of evolved ships continued their endless transformation, a living testament to the power of change. The ancient threat of the slumbering fleet had become something new, something growing, something alive with possibility. You know, Rogers said thoughtfully, next time humanity says they're only sending one ship, I think we'll all pay very close attention to exactly what kind of ship it is. Walker smiled one last time. That's probably wise, Admiral. That's probably very wise indeed. And in the darkness of space, the dance of evolution continued, a gift from humanity to a galaxy that had forgotten how to change.